Hey everyone, my name is Mike Vaughn. I'm a writer for Geek Vibes Nation. I'm also the author of The Ultimate Guide to Strange Cinema.
And I'm Dylan Gonzalez. I'm the editorial director for geekvibesnation.com and also a co-host of the Home Dance Film Festival podcast.
And welcome to a new Video Attic new release roundup. If you're new here, welcome. We have a really good time going back and forth talking about the latest home video releases. Some good, some bad, some horrendous. But you know what? We always just have a really good time talking about them and putting stuff on your radar that maybe isn't. And we have a really fun slate going. So I don't want to start it off negative, but I'm sorry. My first title is a Warner Archives title, and it is In Love and War. And so I made kind of a pact with myself that I would review everything that Warner Archive came out because I feel like it pushes myself as a movie aficionado. There's some stuff that maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed at face value. But I tried so hard to be into this, and it was really not good. Have you seen this yet?
I have not. I have not gotten it in yet.
Okay. So it's a account of young Ernest Hemingway, played by Chris O'Donnell, and he falls in love with this nurse, Sandra Bullock, and it's like in the backdrop of the First World War, and it's like so I really do want to say some really nice things about it though. Like the way this is filmed is incredible. This is a Richard Attenborough film, and just it looks gorgeous. There's so much detail in the production design. I made note of some really amazing tracking shots and how it just really you do get absorbed in this sort of time and place. So that I think is just spot on. I think the acting is really good too. Chris O'Donnell, I think he's underrated. Sandra Bullock, of course, is a national treasure. Yeah, not up for debate. I love her. I think like the cast is definitely kind of what made this tolerable. The problem is it feels like such a nothing burger of a movie. And I know that sounds weird because you would think that, okay, you have the war, you have this romance, you have Hemingway, and I didn't really come out of it with a better understanding of like the war or Hemingway or this romance. It all felt very cold. It felt very clinical. I mean, again, I think that it's beautifully shot. I think it's well directed. I think it's well acted. So I don't know why it just was really hard for me to connect. I felt like Hemingway in this was kind of an asshole. And like there's times when you find him charming, but moreover, he's just kind of a dick. I don't know. I mean, like Sandra Bullock's character was pretty charming and I was kind of invested in that, but I wasn't invested in the relationship as sort of like a, oh my gosh, this is like a great epic doomed romance. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting is like we know historically how this turns out. So, we know that they didn't really get together. And this was when Hemingway was very young. He wasn't at all like established or anything. This was like years before winning the Nobel Prize for literature. So I don't know. It just didn't deepen my sort of understanding of any of these topics, and you feel like that would be kind of like fertile ground for these things. But yeah, there are aspects of it that I like. The visual presentation is really nice. This isn't like an older like that old of a movie, but anyways, suffice to say, the cameras and the film was a little bit better at that time, so the transfer is nicer than maybe like some of the older films that our Warner Archive does. There is a little bit of like blurring and maybe times when the definition isn't maybe as crisp and as nice as it could be, but overall looks really nice. Again, the production design is fantastic. A lot of the locales are very like beautiful, so you get that really beautiful, rich kind of color from the photography and like highlights the costumes and everything that I really did like about this movie. Like I don't want to just completely shit all over it because like I said, there are aspects that are good. But yeah, looks nice, sounds nice. We only get a trailer, so that's not super surprising. But if you're a fan of, you know, Richard Attenborough or Sandra Bullock or Chris O'Donnell or like all of that, you're a completist, need this, you need this movie in your life. It's pretty good looking. It's just it didn't really connect with me. That's okay.
Yeah, I surprisingly never heard of this movie when it was announced, and I'm we're a big Sandra Bullock household. We love her, and so I was excited to check it out. I'm going to temper my expectations now that I know that it's not the best in her filmography, but I I know a lot of people do not agree with me. But I am glad that Warner Archive in recent months has uh, started complementing their older releases with some newer stuff, like newer titles from like the 90s or even the 2000s, like with Before Night Falls that you talked about recently. But because there's some gems in the 90s that I hope come out soon, but I love their variety. And this wasn't on my radar, but I'm glad that it is probably the best presentation that could have gotten this through Warner Archive. So I'm glad it came out.
Yeah. Real quick, what's your favorite Sandra Bullock comedy? Go.
Probably Miss Congeniality. It's a classic.
Okay.
What
All
about
right.
yours?
So I was gonna say that, but you know, to not parrot that, I would say like The Heat is like a fun.
Yes, yes.
Um, yeah, but that's pretty classic. But yeah, no, she's great in this. I think you'll have a good time, at least with like again the aspects that I liked. So
Yeah. Going from one prestige label to another, a very different type of movies. um, this is one from the Criterion Collection. It is Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets. This is a first time watch for me, and I was very excited because Scorsese is one of my favorite directors, even though I haven't seen all of his stuff. I'm trying to catch up, and this was an essential part of getting caught up. So here's the interior. This is a 4K release, so the 4K disc and the Blu-ray. Not too much going. It's just like a black cover with the a hand over a flame right here, which is a recurring thing throughout the movie. And so this has a Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro in this. This is the first pairing between Scorsese and De Niro, which would bring about a rich array of classics. Some of the best films that have ever been released are some of their collaborations. Here is the fold-out booklet. So here's one side, and the other little doofus Robert De Niro, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. And this just kind of unfolds into an essay here, and all the transfer information and all that stuff.
I mean,
Probably
these
went pretty
really are the
quickly.
centerfolds for like movie geeks, if you think about it. Like, they are.
Like, ooh, ooh, this was scanned in 4K. All right.
Oh my gosh, the director essay.
Oh, oh my goodness. Yeah. So as I said, this was a first time watch, and I was interested to see kind of where this fell for me in Scorsese's filmography, because obviously he's been around for a long time. This came out like 50 years ago. And this wasn't his first movie, but I think this is kind of considered to be one of the first movies that kind of established Scorsese as we know him today. I believe this is his first crime movie in the way that we know. Like he's like created like Goodfellas and Casino and all like kinds of great crime movies. But this one, it's interesting as kind of like almost like a bookend to what he did with The Irishman a few years ago, because that movie is very much a culmination of like a lifetime of telling stories about these. So The Irishman was like kind of a culmination of a year's worth of these gangster stories, and he had been telling these stories, but it was also kind of a look at a gangster at the end of his life and kind of reckoning with that on a more personal level. Mean Streets, it's interesting because it is at the beginning of his career when he's more scrappy and hungry. This is a very much a small scale gangster tale where these are street figures who they are very much like kind of like low man on the totem pole. They are kind of like a street level organization where they're kind of goons and like kind of doofuses, as I kind of alluded to earlier, because the way they like try to conduct their kind of like gangster business is very haphazard, and they're not very confident in what they're doing. And especially the Harvey Keitel character, he's balancing being like a religious man, but also dealing with these gangster aspects and wanting to kind of get out of this lifestyle, but always being pulled back in different ways, and trying to cover for his friend played by Robert De Niro, Johnny Boy, who is really just like a grade A fuck up and just like he's very unpredictable. This is one of the most unpredictable Robert De Niro performances I've ever seen, because you just never know what his character is going to do. He can just really kind of like switch on a dime, and it is interesting because they're not intimidating in the way a lot of like Scorsese would develop his mobsters and gangsters in years to come. That they really are just kind of haphazard, and just seeing them on this journey is very interesting, and just kind of their moral, like questioning of morals and their loyalty to one another and what they owe to one another. It's very interesting and explored in really great ways. I would say this is probably more middle Scorsese for me, which, when considering he's one of my favorite directors, it's still a fantastic movie. There's other Scorsese movies I love more, but Mean Streets is a very good movie, and I'm really glad I got to see it with this Criterion 4K, because I think this was kind of the ultimate presentation for this outside of seeing it in a movie theater, because this was the transfer was overseen by Scorsese and his longtime editor Thelma Schoonmaker, and it's been restored in 4K from the original camera negative. There has been some controversy online about the color grading. I've never seen this before, but considering it is overseen by Scorsese, and he is known for film preservation, not just his, but like worldwide, like his World Cinema Association, like the sets that Criterion puts out of World Cinema. He's like kind of responsible for these restorations, or has a big hand in these restoration projects. So if he's restoring his own film, I don't think he's someone who would just like haphazardly change the color grade. I think it's probably more so getting closer to what the original print was. But there will be people on the internet who are going to take umbrage with how this looks, because it doesn't look exactly how old Blu-rays used to look. And they're like, it looks like urine or whatever. It's not like a yellow color gray. Like I read all these things all the time, and it's so frustrating sometimes. Sometimes people are right, but sometimes people have ideas of like, it looked like this in the theaters, but the movie came out in 1972. I'm like, I highly doubt you remember how it looked 50 years ago in theaters, but by all means, because I can't remember how things looked 3 years ago in theaters. So you're doing better than I am. But the 4K restoration as it looks on here, to me, I think it looks really great. I think the film grain is retained. It looks very nice. It's resolved well. Really nice black levels. It is a very gritty movie, but I think it looks exactly how it should look. And this has the original mono soundtrack. So you can tell there's a little bit of source limitations with this original sound, because some of the sounds, especially in the opening music, I found just to be slightly harsh. I don't think it was damaged. It's just, I think it was how it kind of was captured in the or the original source was. But I think it sounds really nice and pretty stable throughout. There are some good special features on here. There is a select scene commentary from Scorsese, which I believe was recorded in 2004. There is a 30-minute conversation from, I believe it was 2012, with director Richard Linklater and Martin Scorsese. So that's pretty cool. I love Richard Linklater as well. There's a 30-minute new video essay and a couple of different featurettes, including like an excerpt from a documentary and everything. Those run about 10 to 15 minutes long. And you saw the booklet and everything. So overall, pretty well-rounded package. Really nice presentation for this. I love Scorsese. I'll follow him to the ends of the earth. So I was very excited to add this to my collection. And if you're a Scorsese fan, definitely do the same.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I'm kind of like you. I also have not seen Mean Streets. That's one that is like this glaring thing in my filmography of his. So this seems kind of like the perfect time to check this out. And yeah, I also kind of just really quick want to like agree with what you said about like people being a little bit maybe too hardcore about like some of the color grading. And yeah, I understand that like there, like as you said, there are times when that's a fair criticism. But yeah, it's like when you have somebody that's like Scorsese working with the restorationist, you have to kind of trust that he knows
Yeah.
best.
And it's different to me, I think, with Scorsese, especially like, because of what I said, compared to what you were talking about, like about a month ago with William Friedkin in The Exorcist, R.I.P. William Friedkin, but just him changing certain things, like bathing it in like blue whenever it wasn't. That's like heavily revisionism, and he like scrubbed the grain from like the exorcism scene, which was awful. But I think with Scorsese specifically, since he is such a pioneer of film preservation, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that this is how it's supposed to look.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. And I definitely will check that out. And which would be interesting. I love that cast, classic, great actors. It's kind of fun seeing them when they were like younger.
Oh yeah.
Also, so my next title, I'm sticking with Warner Archive. This one fared better for me, and that is the Elvis movie Double Trouble.
Oh boy.
Um, yeah, and again, I try to be super fair. It's again nothing that I would maybe necessarily pick on my own, but I want to not be a film snob. I want to embrace other kind of films. So this is pretty fun. So there is kind of a funny irony about this being set in England when famously Elvis never toured outside of the US and let alone went and just toured England. So this is very clearly like backlot England. But I think that kind of adds to this cheesy charm is what I feel like the centerpiece of this movie is.
Mhm.
It's this very 60s teeny bopper kind of take on like James Bond. Maybe you could even say it's a little bit of like a the Carry On films
Mm.
with that sort of like absurdist at times like humor. I always find these Elvis movies really funny when like they have like the love interest that's like not interested in Elvis Presley, and you're like, really, really though. Like, but yeah, I mean, it's a movie. It is like I don't know if you can just tell from the back, but it is just very painfully 60s. Again, I feel like that's part of the charm. If you like kind of kitschy kind of stuff like that. And the plot's not amazing. There's sort of like again, it's sort of like a James Bond-esque sort of heist thief movie and shenanigans. I don't want to give too much away, but the plot is kind of like you have a double Elvis sort of shenanigans going on. It's fine. I had a fun enough time watching it. It's not something I would probably watch again, but some of the other Elvis titles that I've covered in the past, this one's maybe one that maybe I feel like holds up a little bit better than some of the other ones. So yeah, not bad. Pretty fun. The songs are really not that memorable, to be honest. And like I was like struggling to even kind of remember what some of those were. But like when you marathon these movies, it's like sometimes they just go in your ear and out the other, and it's not great if it's not very memorable. But I don't know. I'm sure there's Elvis fans out there that kind of want everything and everything out. And it looks pretty good. Like again, this is a like 60s film. I think like the way like the colors really pop in this are really fun. I mean, this is a very just bright, uh, very cheekily sort of kitschy kind of movie. So you have that sometimes maybe over the top aesthetic. And I love how, we get a nice restoration that really highlights that. Sounds really good as well. Special features, we just get a couple cartoons, but it's like rock themed, so that's kind of fun. I do like when they curate Some of like the cartoons to sort of fit the feature. It's not amazing, but it's, I mean, I'll give them credit. That's a cool feature. So Double Trouble, it's fine. It's just again, it does like stuff like that never really wows me on the face of it, but you know, go in with an open mind. It's fun.
Okay, I have thoughts, and I'll be brief. First off, that cover art is very misleading because the whole time I expected Elvis to have a twin or anything, and there's not. There's just a single Elvis, and I don't know why they kind of misled me with this, but there is just a single Elvis, and but in a movie called Double Trouble with that poster art, it is misleading. Second thing, I rebut your assertion that there are no memorable songs in here because there's a song I have been like I felt like I was having an aneurysm whenever I was watching this movie because or having an out of body experience because whenever I heard Elvis on the back of a truck singing Old McDonald's, I thought I was going to lose my shit and like I was just like I had to explain this to my wife. I was like, he was just singing Old McDonald. He was just like, Old McDonald had a farm. E-I-E-I. And I was like, what is going on in this movie? It is insane. But that's it. I out of the Elvis movies that I've seen from Warner Archive in recent months, I prefer Spin Out from a few months ago. This one was fun, but more so in a, like, am I losing my mind type of way. But it's certainly a time for Elvis fans. So, and it's a really good presentation. But I did feel like I was having a, like an out of body experience at times when watching this movie. It was insane.
Nice.
Anyway, my next title. Sorry, I had to get that off my chest because it's insane. My next title from Shout Studios. This is a big set, but I don't think it'll take me as long to talk about this because every movie is basically the same, but just slightly different. This is from Shout Studios. This is the Police Academy collection. 7 films in one slimline case. So I appreciate that because I have the old DVD set that's all 7 snapper cases. So it's like this wide. So I'm glad to retire that finally and just really clear up some shelf space. But here's without the slip box. This is 7 films, but there's 5 discs, and the movies are spread across 4 discs. But these are pretty short, so they fare pretty well compression wise. You have the first movie on a single disc, and then you have 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7, and then a disc for special features back here. And like I said, all the movies are right around an hour and a half. So even with the double movie disc, that's only like a little over 3 hours of disc space. So it's not too bad. These movies, I'd seen all these before when I was younger, and I was interested, cautiously interested, but interested to revisit these. And these are fun in a way. I enjoyed them, but I recognize these are not good movies, and especially to marathon them back to back, you do start to kind of get to a point where you're like, did I just watch this? And you're like, no, it's a different movie. They're just doing the same things in just slightly different ways. I think the first one is the most successful. It is the only one that is R-rated, and they kind of tone it down a little bit as it goes along. Not that I need like gratuitous nudity in every outing, but just like some of the gags that they're able to do in the first one, they just kind of make it a little bit more like mainstream friendly for the follow-ups. And I don't think any of the movies are outright classics, but they're fun. It's normal people getting the chance to like are being recruited to go into the police academy, and they're all kinds of like from different backgrounds, and they're all kind of like unusual fit for like a police officer, but you see them going through training, and there are every time it's just like these misfits against this authority figure. Usually it's the same person. In the second one they switch it up and they kind of like meld the two in the third one, and then the guy just kind of finishes out the rest of the series. But there's like a authority figure who doesn't like what's going on, and he tries to stop it because he wants to be in charge. But every time he's like getting one pulled over on him by the cadets, or just his own incompetence. But there's some creative figures are like for the first four films, which I'd forgotten about this. The first four films stars Steve Guttenberg. I did not realize he left. I thought he was there for throughout the whole series, but he bounces after the fourth installment, which I actually think that is when the series starts to go downhill a little bit more. And I'm not the biggest Steve Guttenberg fan, but I think he is kind of the right straight man for this series to hold things more together. Some of the straight men they try to get for like Assignment Miami Beach, which I think is the fifth one, they're just kind of like super bland. Not that Gutenberg is the most like spicy individual, but like he's at least has a little bit of personality. I think people know like Michael Winslow, the man who's like creates all the sounds with his mouth and everything. He's like kind of the more iconic character. One of my personal favorites, I really love Bobcat Goldthwait, and he comes in the second movie as a criminal, and in the third movie he comes back as like reformed and becomes a police officer for the third and fourth movie. He also bounced after the fourth movie, so I was also kind of disappointed about that. There's Hightower, who's just like a huge African American man who's like can like turn over police cars, and he's just like a very intimidating character. I love the captain. He's like kind of like a Leslie Nielsen-esque, like just kind of like not an idiot, but just kind of like on another planet. But he's also very funny and kind-hearted. And he really supports the cadets and everything. These movies from movie to movie are not super different. It's like I said, it's always kind of like a us versus them, and in the kind of third act, the the new cadets or whatever, they get into kind of some kind of like larger than life assignment. So they're like taking down like some jewel thieves or some like bank robbers or any kind of like just civil unrest. They'll usually get that. That reminds me, I don't really exactly know how to pronounce his name. He recently passed away in the last few years, but he was on Star Trek and Boston Legal. But Rene Auberjonois.
We're going to learn how to pronounce famous actor Rene Auberjonois. Rene Auberjonois.
I'm butchering his name, but he plays like a very eccentric villain in Assignment Miami Beach, and he's just one of the only reasons why that movie works, the fifth one. Like he's just like his screen presence, he's just like really committing to this bit, and I really appreciate that about him. I think and the last two installments especially are just kind of like bland, and you don't really kind of think about them too much, but the first four are good enough, I think. And if you're a fan of this series, I think you do want to have them all. And I'm glad that I did get to revisit them, even though, like I said, binging these is maybe not the best idea, because you just start to not know where you are in life. And because it's every time Michael Winslow just doing some weird sounds and doing a Bruce Lee parody where like, with a mouth not matching the subtitles, like that kind of joke and everything, because he can do stuff with his mouth and like a noise and stuff. It's just the same jokes, but they're fun. They're fun. I didn't like uproariously laugh, but I had like a baseline enjoyable time throughout most of these. As far as the set, this has been a long time in the works, but a lot like fans have really been wanting this for a long time, and I think they won't be disappointed. All the films have new 2K scans from the interpositives, and they worked with Warner Brothers on this, and these are really good scans. I think there's some minor room for improvement here and there, but overall these are really nice 2K scans, and there's not too much in the way of like a source deficiency or anything like that. These are pretty consistent overall, really good encode. I don't think anyone would be very disappointed by what they came up with. This also has an archival commentary track for the original Police Academy film, a new commentary track for Police Academy 4 from the director. There's also the disc full of new special features. There are all kinds of interviews, like new interviews with some of the like directors, some of the cast, some of like the cinematographers, screenwriters. There's all kinds of stuff on this final disc, and I'm glad that they really did put a lot of work into getting all these special features on here and getting them a lot of new people interviewed for like as a retrospective of this series. And anyone who wants to see a full account of everything that's on this, look out for my my review of this on geekvibesnation.com, which should be coming within a couple of days of this video being released. You should see that on Geek Vibes Nation just to see the full rundown, but it's a very impressive package overall. And I'm glad Shout Studios did this. They've been really killing it this year. They've been doing a lot of great catalog titles that have been like a long time like once for a lot of people. So this is another one crossed off the list. So if you're a fan of the series, pick it up. Shelf friendly packaging, love that. I think you won't be disappointed.
Nice. Like I'm really curious how this holds up in sort of like a modern like lens with like the cops and that being sort of like a maybe a bit divisive now. Do you feel like how do you feel like that holds up as far as that being like for comedy?
I don't think it is the most forefront aspect for sure. I don't think the cops are always portrayed in the best light because it is kind of the whole thing is basically that the cops aren't cutting it, so they're trying to get this new blood in to see if they can turn things around. So on that basic level, I think it is kind of a shot against like the establishment, because anytime the establishment, which is like the people in charge who are trying to shut down this kind of subsection, they're always the fuck ups who are always like kind of blowhards and kind of have a false sense of confidence. Whereas the people who are coming in off the streets and kind of going through the academy and putting like actual effort into it, they're kind of the ones like the underdogs are the more the ones who are getting things done compared to the established guard. That being said, coming from a modern perspective, there are so many things that have aged poorly in this. This is an 80s comedy, I remind you. There are things that you're just like, oh, that is not good. But overall, I think you kind of know what to expect, and it's definitely not the worst. There's definitely some like sexist stuff. There's some racist stuff, but then there's also some characters. A lot of the characters that are in here, especially like there's like three for the first few movies. There's three prominent African American characters, one of which is a woman, and they are not used as like the butt of jokes like for their like race. They are very important pivotal characters, and like the woman, she is her defining characteristic is that she kind of talks very softly and she needs to be more assertive and everything, but it's not clearly drawing on different race like stereotypes. There are some iffy things throughout, but it's not as bad as it could be. So I think that's mostly what you can ask for from 80s comedies, because that's what it was. That's what we had to deal with. And you just kind of have to put that in perspective, either like accept it and watch it, or just like pass it by because you know it's not for you. And this isn't the worst example I've seen, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think like when they do like a sale and this is like super cheap, I'll probably pick this up because I think I own the first one, but none of the other ones. So that could be kind of a fun exploration. But yeah, like probably not like binged, where you like suffer maybe like some brain. Yeah. So I'm taking a slight break from Warner Archive to pivot over to Mondo Macabro for my next title. And this is a pretty interesting one. So my Mondo slate was kind of interesting because this is the only one that I haven't heard of, and that's called it's called Shadow of Death. And here is back. Nothing super amazing inside. You'll note that this is like region awe, so that's always I think that's usually the case with Mondo. Yeah, so this was really interesting because you have that sort of trope of gaslighting women for like nefarious purposes, and What's interesting about this movie is they sort of reverse, like, gender swap that. And it is a husband that's being like drugged, literally drugged and like manipulated to, get his money. It's like a wife that is sleeping with the her husband's brother, and they're in cahoots. And there's some like really interesting twists and turns. But again, I think like the most interesting aspect is sort of the gender inverse of um drugging the crap out of the husband. And then like it's so twisted too, because they their plan is like they're shooting him up with stuff to keep him awake, so he like chemically cannot go to sleep. And that of course like is making him crazy. And they're like planting all these suggestions in his head. I don't want to like spoil like some kind of like twist, but there's always this sort of back and forth of like who's really out for themselves, who's maybe in it for love, or is it like they're both in it for the money, or is one gonna like fuck over the other one? So there's always this sort of like push and pull. Plus, there's a blackmailer that's kind of thrown into the mix, which I think it kind of over maybe complicates the story a little bit needlessly. But it's kind of fascinating. It's not very long. It's like what, 92 minutes, and there is definitely enough moving parts that it's interesting. Again, I think that there's like some aspects that are maybe, I think, a little bit overwritten. And of course, like with some, like a lot of these movies, there's aspects that kind of don't make a lot of sense. They're kind of like in that giallo sort of like you just kind of go with it because the director and the writer said so kind of thing. So you have to, that's a little bit par for the course. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Again, I think the husband getting gaslit and being manipulated is like the fascinating aspect of this. It's not amazing, but it's again interesting. And if you're a giallo fan, this is a traditionally giallos are like Italian, but this is from Spain. Um, but I think that term is kind of ubiquitous now for any sort of country doing these sort of like pulpy crime thrillers. So yeah, it's fine. I think that it could have definitely been better. I think that there are aspects of it. It's hard to talk about without spoiling any of the twists, but some of those aspects don't really make a lot of sense if you kind of stop and think about it. But again, that's kind of par for the course with some giallo films. So we do get some nice extras. Of course, Mondo always does a really nice job. We have like a interview with the director. We have like some alternate scenes. This is, I checked this make sure, but if this was the case, but it's only Spanish language. There's no English dub. Yeah, so it looks like it's just subs over dubs, which that's good. I always kind of prefer that anyways. Yeah, looks really good. This is from a new restoration from the 35 millimeter print. The movie's not in the best of shape, so it's not pristine by any measure, but it does look nice. Like there's a lot of like nighttime scenes, and you can tell that that pops a little bit more. Where I have to imagine that like an older print would just maybe like be like you couldn't see anything in those scenes, so you kind of appreciate some of the, like I said, more darkly lit stuff. So yeah, looks good, sounds good. Not a whole lot in terms of features, but we do have some, which is nice. And then I know that with a lot of the Mondo titles, this is the standard edition. There's usually like the red case edition, which has a booklet. But of course, this is like the more sort of cost effective, more standard edition. So you don't get that. You just kind of get, but it's the same movie. Obviously, it's the same features. You just don't have the booklet. But yeah, it's good enough time. Especially again, I like I'm a big fan of giallos, so It's nice finding like a more obscure one from Spain. So if you dig that, I would say definitely check it out. Mondo always has an amazing presentation overall. So like I never really have a complaint about that. So I say check it out. It's not perfect, but it's it's good enough time.
Yeah, as you know, ever since we started knowing each other, I've gotten more into Giallo. So that might be a Mondo title I need to check out for sure. That sounds interesting. So I'm glad you put that on my radar. One that I'm very excited to talk about. This is my first one from Screen Factory, the Shout Studios subsidiary. This is a movie that's dear to my heart. This is the Blob remake. I believe it's from 1988. And I first watched the original Blob a few years back, the Criterion one. But I'd actually seen this version first. I have a history with this movie I will not go into right now, but this movie, I was interested to check this out because I picked up the Blu-ray collector's edition that was put out a few years back from Screen Factory. And I was glad to see it was coming out in 4K. There's the reversible cover art, which is, I like that. And so for really quickly, for those who don't know, The Blob is just a movie about a blob, a killer amorphous blob that has landed in the outskirts of a town and starts making its way through and like kind of just sucking up people into its being and like basically like digesting them. Like there's just like leaving them with nothing basically. So along the lines, what I really appreciate about this version of it is it gets a lot more gnarlier because like whenever the blob like latches onto like a leg, it can like just kind of like melt it off basically, and you just like see like the stump that's remaining. And there's some really cool practical effects in this, and just seeing how some of it is done like with like forced perspective and like miniatures and everything, and like seeing just the blob just kind of like flop out of a door. You can kind of tell that is like it's a special effect. You can kind of see how it's done, but I appreciate that so much more than like digital effects. I think it's just so much more like tactile and interesting, and I really like that about this. It's been a while, like more than a couple years since I've seen the original Blob, but I feel like this version had a lot more emphasis on kind of the government's role in the blob and what they're trying to kind of like cover up and what the blob is trying to be used for. And I think that this had like a pretty interesting, maybe slightly heavy-handed, but interesting commentary on greed and power and just like government oversight. I think they pulled that off pretty well. The performances, they're pretty solid. You got a young Kevin Dillon, a young Shawnee Smith. So many great young actors who they're just putting in solid work. It's not like mind blowing, but everyone does a really nice job. I think it's a pretty solid horror movie. It's fun, good, like I said, good practical effects. It's a little bit creepy, good, like really fast paced. It's a little over 90 minutes, and it really uses its time wisely. It was amusing watching this. It had been a while, but I would notice some things. I'm like, oh, they're setting this up for like you would see bits of foreshadowing. Like, okay, I see that this person's trying to attempt to jump his dirt bike over something, but he's not quite making it. I bet he's gonna do it in a pivotal moment later in the movie, and sure enough, there you go. But it's a really fun movie, and this presentation's really good. I do have a comment on this in just a second, but overall, this comes in 4K and HDR10. Normally, Screen Factory does pretty much all their stuff in Dolby Vision. This is from a 4K master provided by Sony. I mention this because Sony recently has gotten into a trend of re-releasing a bunch of their movies that they released on 4K previously in standard HDR in Dolby Vision. I just talked about that a couple last week with like Guns of Navarone and Black Hawk Down. They've done this a lot. This is a slightly different situation where this is Scream Factory putting out the 4K in HDR10. It would not shock me if in a few years this came out in Dolby Vision from Sony. They said that this was prepared by Sony and delivered like in HDR10. It would not surprise me to see them do a Dolby Vision grade in the future. However, I think it's different from a normal Sony title because whenever Sony releases it, you are not going to get the plethora of special features that are on this, and there are so many special features. It's insane. But I will. This has a 2 commentary tracks, and me just saying this might not stress how much it, but there's 12 interviews that last like at least 15 minutes long. That's a shit ton of interviews that are on this disc, and it takes a while to get through. But there's also some other featurettes like a making of and some trailers and stuff. But they have so many interesting new to the original Blu-ray collector's edition, which was like 2019. They carry over all of those, but there's so many good interviews on this. Even if they do happen to release this in Dolby Vision, which I don't think would make a monumental difference, I think you would want to have this collector's edition. So I think you can safely purchase this now. And if you're a huge fan and you do just crave Dolby Vision, you can maybe get that in a few years. But don't deprive yourself in the meantime, because the base HDR10 layer of this one is really good. Really nice transfer, really rich colors in this, especially like the hues of the blob itself, the pink hues. It's really nice. Really good compression, black levels. Looks very nice. So Scream Factory did a nice job with the blob. If you have only seen the original, you're in for a treat with the remake. I'm not saying that it is better than the original. I just think it is one of the examples of like, if you're going to remake it, do something like a little bit different and kind of like maintain the spirit, but kind of push the boundaries a little bit. And I think that's what this team did. And I think they did a really nice job. So yeah, the Blob from 1988. It's a good time.
Yeah, and I'll say it. I think this is far better than the original, and I have a soft and listen,
Yeah.
I have a soft spot for that. But like, there are aspects of the original that just like Steve McQueen's like the oldest teenager in that like
Yeah.
ever. But yeah, oh my gosh, like that phone booth scene,
Yeah.
like oh, that still
Just
boggles.
just her trying to like get the call out and stuff, and she's like, send the sheriff, and then you just see outside the phone booth it's great.
And yeah, that whole effect just every time I watch it, it still blows my mind. So that's so cool. And yeah, that is like day one for me. So my next title is another Mondo title. This one's probably up there with like what a lot of fans would probably be really interested in. Although it's like I always feel like with Jess Franco films, I have to like preface it by saying like these aren't really for me. Like I I feel so alienated from this fandom. But anyways, this is the Sinister Dr. Orloff, but I keep wanting to say Olaf, like Frozen.
Yeah.
Which now I'm like, I need that crossover. Um, but yeah, so I don't know, like for people that watch this pretty regularly, I have this complicated relationship with the director. I appreciate the fact that he has this huge following. It's very just sleazy exploitation wrapped up in the vaguest horror plot strung together with like a lot of breasts and yeah, filth and stuff. And that's fine. That's great. Listen, love that. Love that for fans. It's just again, it's like one of those where if you're not really into that, like the plot just really isn't that special. I mean, I think that out of all of the Franco films, this one's maybe the one that I can kind of tolerate because there is some interesting things going on as far as like the thrust of the plot. There is a little bit of this mystery element of like these women being kidnapped and what's going on, and then you kind of find out that it's sort of like a they're harvesting like the skin from these women to rejuvenate the main baddie's like wife. And I feel like I've seen other movies where they kind of do that a little bit better. There's a pretty wild Peter Cushing movie called Corruption, which has its same exact plot, but check out that movie. It's amazing. I'll even like link where you can buy that one as well, because that one is mwah. And it's such a weird movie for Cushing to be in. I think he kind of like didn't like being in that actually, but the movie's cool. But yeah, so it does have this like really grimy, kind of gross aesthetic to it. Like there's like a flogging scene that's very uncomfortable, but I think like it's part of this sort of like fetishy, like the plot's like kind of who cares, but like boobs, smack, smack, smack. I don't know. Again, it's really hard for me to like really just get into it, but like it's like I also feel bad just like disparaging it, because there's plenty of movies that like are kind of gross and grimy that I love, that I feel like I connect with a little bit better. So, yeah, I think like I don't know, not trying to think how I want to say that. Like, don't necessarily take my word for it. If you feel like this, you do kind of like this grimy. And again, I like stuff like that, but it's like his movies just never really connect with me, and I don't know. But I know that this is definitely one of his films that like a lot of people kind of like. It's a cult classic. It's one of his early films. And I think like it's one of the first like Spanish import films to really do well in America, which is pretty interesting all by itself. So we do get a really nice. So this is from a new 4K transfer, and I will say that there are like scenes where it's like the grain level is just absolutely insane, like where it almost looks like a snowstorm situation. Not all the time, but I just like, I just wanted to like kind of throw that out there. I think like overall it looks nice. I mean, Franco's films never are the most visually stunning film. It's just like there's a red room with a lady and she's getting like spanked to death or whatever. It's what it is. But uh it looks fine. We do have a really entertaining commentary track, and we have some interviews, and again, there is a like special red case edition that has a booklet. This does not, but this is like um, region free, like region A, B, and C. So yeah, it's okay. I feel like if you're a Franco fan, I mean, this is obviously a must. If you have a hard time connecting with his films, like I do, I don't necessarily know if this is gonna like convince you otherwise, but yeah, but I would say it's definitely a little bit more entertaining than some of his other movies. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'm not going to harp on what I say every time you talk about a Franco film, which is just, I know it won't be for me, so I'm just not going to embark upon that. But happy for those who enjoy his work. Glad it's being released. So excited for you. My next title, I was very interested to check this out because I've always heard this title, but I never had seen the movie actually, which you'll probably find surprising. This is from Screen Factory, and this is Pumpkinhead. So I had never seen this little fella, but he seemed to be very interesting, and just to uh, uh, finally watched this. It was interesting. The great Lance Henriksen is in it. So you have the 4K disc and the Blu-ray disc here. And I knew pretty much nothing about the plot, but what this is Pumpkinhead is basically an entity monster that can be summoned for revenge purposes. And that happened. You see early on, like the first scene is like a flashback to Lance Henriksen's character as a kid and seeing his dad basically summon Pumpkinhead to enact some violence against a, a man who was seemingly not good. And this, it seems, seemingly has kind of lingered with him, but also as it flashes forward to a current day, it almost seems kind of like a dream. But this all comes into play whenever he has a young son who, I don't think it's a spoiler alert because it's a main plot point. His son accidentally gets killed by this group of teenagers who are like riding around on some dirt bikes, and he kind of goes mad with grief and ends up trying to summon Pumpkinhead through like this like witch entity woman, and who's has some really great makeup work going on in her case to kind of enact revenge, and then also having to reckon with this figure once he is back and causing terror, and just figuring out like, did he go too far in his grief? Does he really want Pumpkinhead doing all this stuff? And it's a pretty simple plot. It's basically a revenge plot with this like this entity, and it's killing people. And but I think it's not so much about what the plot is, just how it's executed, and it's executed very well. This is once again another great example of practical effects work. I really love the design of Pumpkinhead. It's a unique looking design. It's a little bit like creepy and like otherworldly, but also it just, you can believe it. It kind of has like a believability about it that I really appreciated. And none of the like Lance Henriksen, he's doing a really good job, but none of the other actors are doing like amazing work. They're fine. They do what they need to do, and they're not bad. They're just not like blowing you away. I did really find it interesting that there's a one of the young kids of kind of like the like this farmer character, like this kind of like poor kind of character. One of the kids is played by Mayim Bialik from The Big Bang Theory and Blossom. She's one of the young kids, which I found to be a fun tidbit. Overall, I think it's a pretty fun movie. It's not like my favorite horror discovery that I've had in my years of like the past few years of home media, physical media, but it's a fun movie, and I think it's really well done, and I really love the practical special effects. And this does a really nice job in the audiovisual department. This does come with Dolby Vision. It's a 4K scan of the original camera negative in Dolby Vision. This has a commentary track. This has a 49-minute tribute to Stan Winston, which is really cool. You get a lot of like interviews from the cast and creative team and everything. That's a good new interview. There's also a 64-minute making of special, which is really cool, and plenty of interviews to go around. Not quite as many as the Blob, but it makes up for it with that tribute and the making of featurette. Other than that, there's just like little things like trailers and stuff like that. But it's a pretty well-rounded package, and you can't really go wrong with the audiovisual, which sounds really nice, looks really good. A lot of this does play, like especially the latter half of the movie takes place at nighttime, so it has really nice black levels that resolve well. I think anyone who's only seen kind of older versions of this movie, they will be knocked sideways by how good this looks. It's a really good transfer. So if you're a fan of Pumpkinhead, this is the release to get. So definitely make sure to check that one out.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I even before your review, I've heard really good things about the new transfer. I've seen this movie many times. I got to see this at one of the early Monster Mania cons with Lance Henriksen in attendance.
Oh, cool.
They did a screening, and if you ever get a chance to meet him, he's so nice. He's one of the nicest people you ever want to meet. I have one of those. I don't know if you remember those McFarlane action figures, like the horror line that he did. I have a Pumpkinhead that he signed. I'll see if I can get Andre, our editor extraordinaire, to put that on the screen. But yeah, love this. I'm so excited you got to see it and see it obviously probably in the best possible way. So my not my only 4K title, but one of the more weirder ones for sure. And this is like by far one of my favorite Mondo titles from this week. That's Dr. Caligari in 4K. So I did review this not super long ago, it feels like. But yeah, I'll like break it down anyways, just really quick. It's not so much it's kind of a in name only remake of the classic silent film. I guess you could say aesthetically they do use that like homemade German expressionist kind of set design. This is definitely very loose in the narrative department, but it's a lot of almost vignettes on this. Like, it's a very weird sexual discovery kind of film in a very weird. I wouldn't even say this is a horror film. It's more just a weird exploitation, surreal. I saw somebody kind of compare it to Richard Elfman's Forbidden Zone, and that seems pretty accurate. Actually, I think this would actually make a really fun double feature. So I really like the Blu-ray version of this, and I think that like somehow this even looks better than that. And for whatever you think about like really weird art house 80s films, this looks spectacular. Again, it has this really weird homemade aesthetic, but it's done in a very creative kind of way, and I love that we get this movie with all these weird visuals. It's such a beautiful looking presentation. And this was so cool because I remember just how excited I was when this was coming out, period, because for the longest time this was so hard to find on home video, at least in the States. So now that we have like a 4K edition of this is awesome. So this is like the standard edition. I know that there was like a limited edition from Mondo, which is out of print, I believe. I mean, if you're like a diehard fan, you might be able to like find it somewhere, maybe on eBay, but like, this is a pretty affordable 4K standard edition. I believe this just ports over everything from the Blu-ray edition, but we have commentary tracks, we have some interviews, trailer. Looks really great, and damn it, I'm just so happy that this has a 4K release. It is such a cool movie. If you kind of dig weird art house movies from the 80s, this is sort of a must watch in my opinion. It's very cool.
It really amuses me because I was reading something recently about how it's kind of weird how a lot of these movies from the 70s and 80s are getting, especially from these boutique labels like Vinegar Syndrome and Kino and everyone, they are getting these like very elaborate, like nicely done 4Ks, but then like a lot of the major studios like Paramount and Warner Brothers, like they'll be like slightly compromised in certain ways. And it's just like, if this random ass movie from the 70s that like was shot on 16 millimeter can look better than like The Exorcist, what are we doing here? So it's very amusing how like God bless the boutique labels that take on these small projects. It's just very amusing how like the level of care between like something that's like, this is our main focus, we want it to be as authentic as possible, compared to some of the things that, as much as we love the big studios, I'm not criticizing all of them, but like there are just sometimes things that are put out that you're just like, what was going on here? What were they thinking?
Absolutely.
But yeah, good on Mondo. My next title is a TV series. I had 2 TV series this week. This is the first one. This is the complete series of the Showtime original City on a Hill. And this has Aldous Hodge and Kevin Bacon. This ended last year after 3 seasons and 26 episodes. All 3 seasons are have included here. So you have, I'll be careful here. There we go. So yeah, all 3 seasons and 26 episodes are here in one pretty shelf-friendly packaging. And this was one, whenever it was first airing, I was really interested to check it out, but I never got around to it for a while, just because in the age of like that we're in with like television, there's like 40 shows that I want to catch up on at any given time, and there's just so much time. But now I finally got to make time. And this is a really good show. This is set in the 90s. It's set in Boston, and it is a crime show that's kind of like dealing with a DA and like a retired FBI agent, and they're kind of working together. Like Kevin Bacon plays the retired FBI agent who kind of is not always like on the straight and narrow, but he is helping this young DA played by Aldous Hodge, who people might know probably best from, I think he was in Black Adam, and if I recall correctly, he was also in the Invisible Man remake with Elizabeth Moss. But their dynamic as they're trying to kind of be in Boston in the 90s, root out some police corruption and other criminal enterprises, and also showing their very different personal lives, and also giving them a pretty good amount of depth as well. I like that the girlfriends or wives at home are not just decoration, for lack of a better word, like a lot of these series are. They do get a pretty well-rounded arc as well within this framework, and I do not owe this all to them, but this is kind of produced and co-written by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. I think Affleck co-wrote it, like or at least the pilot maybe, or like got it started. And there's just a level of care put into this. So if you like things like The Town or any movies like that, I think you'll really like this. It's just kind of like a really pretty compelling crime drama series that develops pretty nicely over the seasons. The first season's 10 episodes, and this 8 episode season 2 and 3 is 8 episodes. So it's not too long of an investment, but it's a pretty consistently entertaining series with really good performances. And yeah, it was one of those hidden gems on Showtime that you may have missed like me, but now it's time to catch up now that you can get it all on Blu-ray. And it doesn't leave you with too much of like a major cliffhanger, which is it's also welcome. So this looks really good on Blu-ray. It's a new high definition show, like I said, just ended last year. It's as good as you would want it to. It's not overly compressed like on any of these discs. Not too much in the way of special features. It's mostly on the first season. There's a couple of very brief featurettes, like 2 or 3 minutes at most. And there's like 5 of those, I believe. So nothing too substantial, but there's a few like inside the episode type things. And then the rest of the series doesn't get that type of treatment, but it's something. So if you're interested, it's here. It's on Blu-ray. Check it out from Showtime, CBS, Paramount, whatever you want to call the subsidiary. It's out, and it's a good show.
Yeah, and that's so cool. And also, like, you never know. Like, I know we've talked about this before, but like, you never know when like shows are just gonna go away. So it's nice to like have that on physical media. And do you know if it's streaming currently or?
Last I saw, it's been a couple weeks. I think it was still there, if I remember correctly. But there are a lot of shows that just disappear from Showtime, so it might not be there forever. So consider it.
Okay. So my not my final title, but my final Warner Archive title. I kind of say this a little bit like next to last because I found this movie really interesting, and it's one that I have never even like really heard of. And it is Rapa Nui. I don't know if I'm saying that right, hopefully. And back. So yeah, this one is it kind of feels like it's coming out of the wake of like Dances with Wolves, where it's like this big epic you know, sprawling tale of this like other kind of culture. And it's really interesting. So it's kind of based on like the creation of like Easter Island and this like civil war between these two like warring tribes, and they kind of mesh this love story in with that. And normally I'm always like feel like that's a little dubious, but I feel like in this kind of like with Dances with Wolves, I know that movie kind of has its own issues with like the white savior narrative, which is like a whole thing. But I think that like this also has like a really organic kind of love story that not only do I feel like it fits the narrative really well, but I feel like what's interesting about this movie is some like dire stakes with their like love. Like it's kind of complicated because like not really knowing this culture, it kind of just throws you in, as far as like, it doesn't do that in a way that feels like you're just kind of not getting it. Like, it does bring you up to speed, but it is very much like, okay, this is what's happening, but like culturally, it just tries to like catch you up as quick as possible, and then it's like go, go, go. So it kind of has like the, again, warring factions. They're like setting up the Easter Island heads. I'm not sure if that's, I don't know what you call them exactly, but like it's just, there's like different things going on. And you also kind of have like our lead character. He has to sort of like do this like test. But of course he's like warring with this other guy. And if he doesn't like succeed, his love interest will like maybe die. It's really intense, but also it's interesting because there is, and I think this is kind of where it draws a little bit from like Dance with Wolves. There's like this like comedy that kind of feels very quippy in a weird way. And especially when you're like dealing with some pretty heavy like thematic ish like things going on, but then they'll like make some pun or quip, and it feels a little weird, but you just kind of go with it. It doesn't, I don't think it detracts from the movie, but it is weird. It's a choice, but yeah, it's fascinating. Holy crap, is this shot beautifully? Like, it definitely has that like epic sort of sprawling. It's just like the detail, the costumes. It doesn't feel cringy. Like, it feels like authentic. I mean, I'm by no means like a historical person on this, but like it seems like authentic and interesting enough. Definitely gets you kind of into it, even though if you don't really know a lot about sort of the cultural and religious aspects. But yeah, it tells a really good story. It's pretty interesting. I think like the pacing is just crazy because there's so many different elements of the story going along, but it feels like they all kind of work in tandem with each other. So yeah, pretty good movie. Looks great. Again, this is just shot so beautifully. There's really like maybe a few instances where it could have maybe looked a little bit better as far as like clarity, like some of like the color correcting maybe could have been a little bit better, but overall it looks really nice, sounds really good. We just get a trailer. This is one that I would have loved, like a historical commentary or just something to sort of bolster like the historical context behind this. But we have the internet, we can look up stuff like that, but it would have been nice to kind of have some more supplemental stuff. But really good. Did you have a chance to see this one yet?
This is another one that has not come in yet, so I have not been able to check this out yet.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what you think, because it is wild. Like, the humor is, it's like a nice break from like some of the more like heavy aspects of it. But there's like a character that's like, I was just pissing blood. I don't know what that means, like he's like sort of, he has like a high status among the people. And he also kind of is in charge of like divination. Like, he reads like entrails and stuff, but like there's just things that are clearly supposed to be jokey. And I'm like, it feels really weird. I don't know. It's interesting, but I don't think it detracts from the overall quality of the movie. It's pretty good.
Yeah, that sounds interesting, and I trust Warner Archive to pick some interesting movies, so look forward to that one. My next title, I probably won't spend too much time on this just because it's pretty standard fare, but not in a bad way. It's satisfying, especially with some of the darker stuff I get into. I like a little bit of lightness sometimes. This is from MGM, and this is Madison with Jim Caviezel and Jake Lloyd from the Phantom Menace, Star Wars, and Jingle All the Way for this time of year. So he is the little boy who got bullied because people think that he ruined Star Wars, which he's fine. But in this movie, which surprisingly, after I got this, I was delighted to learn that this was actually a Sundance movie, which is good for my purposes since I host a Sundance themed podcast. Cheap plug. But this isn't quite like a lot of Sundance movies I see. It is more kind of traditional mainstream fare, but it's fine. This is it's a period piece set, I believe it's in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken, where it's like a man reflecting back to his childhood with his dad and the small town that he lived in. And this is basically a boat racing movie, a hydroplane boat racing movie. And so it's like this whole town is invested in this boat race, and they've been doing this for years. And but they're kind of, the town is kind of dying, and people are starting moving out, and people are losing their jobs, and this whole town is kind of just crumbling until one day, tired of kind of um, being kind of the butt of the joke around like the boating community, they get chosen uh, to host this big race that's coming up, and people expect them to reject it because they can't cover the entrance fee, but they're like, no, we're doing this. And they kind of like rallied the town together to get like the boat in order and get like the money raised for this. And then there's also the Jim Caviezel character who plays the dad. He is also reckoning with some loss that he's had in the past. He used to be a racer. He lost one of his like best friends whenever he was younger in one of the boat races, so he's dealing with that. So it's your standard sports movie where it's overcoming obstacles and like small town charm, and a lot of training montages and like trying to get the boat just right and everything. And it's just like a cool like 95 minutes. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's not bad. It's not particularly great. You feel a general sense of warmth. I didn't feel overwhelmed with emotion, but you're just like, that's nice. It's pleasant enough. And like the acting's good. Everyone's solid. It's just a solid movie. It's just like kind of forgettable, but if you're in the mood for kind of like a semi-inspirational sports tale, like an underdog tale, it does the trick. And that's kind of the same as said for this Blu-ray. Anyone who knows about MGM's recent catalog releases, they've just been putting a lot of stuff, just like, here's an old transfer on a disc, there you go. And it's pretty much that. Seeing this was from the early 2000s, I believe. 2004. It's not too old, so the transfer is in pretty good shape. It's not like crystal clear, but it holds up well enough. The sound is DTS 5.1. It's nice and robust and everything. No special features at all. There's a play button, and there's an option to whether or not you want to turn on subtitles, English SDH subtitles. So that's all you get on the screen. So um, perfectly fine movie. Don't go out and like rush out to get it, but if you see it around and you feel like having an inspirational sports tale, it'll do the trick. So Madison with Jim Caviezel, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like between that and like Rudy, you're like covering the like sports.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like boat racing is that intense. You were like, some guy died in the last boat race, and I'm just like,
Yeah, but it's like motorized boat racing, so they're like going pretty fast. It's like kind of like NASCAR on the water.
Okay. Um, that might be not must see for me, but it sounds like it has some people in it that are notable. So yeah.
Yeah.
My final title was one I was really, really excited for. It is the 30th anniversary of The Fugitive with Harrison Ford. Here's the back. I believe these are all just the special features are nice. I believe they are all portovers. Um, Same cover art and nothing really going on the inside. So this does have a digital code that is not in now, but if you order it, you will have it. And I really highly recommend this release, but I'll get into it. So The Fugitive, for people that don't really know, is based on an old TV show. The making of it was kind of a shit show. So it turning out as amazing as it did is kind of wild. But this is sort of the ultimate like post Hitchcock man on the run, man wrongly accused. Harrison Ford is his character is wrongly convicted of killing his wife, and Tommy Lee Jones is not sanctioning this buffoonery, and he is chasing after Harrison Ford's character, and it has that like famous like like this scene right there where he's just like,
I don't care.
I don't care. That's pretty good. I did not own this previously, so that's like another reason why I was like really excited. But doing a little bit of homework, I don't think people were really that stoked on the previous Blu-ray. Um, and from what I gather, this is like a pretty good improvement as far as like Blu-ray to the 4K. This looks really great. This is another one of those movies that I think benefits greatly from fantastic cinematography that just gives it this really kind of desolate, weird atmosphere. It is another movie that isn't maybe the most like beautiful looking, but it definitely takes advantage of like its locales, really good set design, costumes, all of that really pops here. Grain level is kind of contained, but it's not completely wiped out. So you still get that really nice film like presentation. Sounds really good. We get an Atmos track here. This is like, of course, action film. You're gonna want that kind of extra like oomph, and I think that's again serves this movie really well. And yeah, again, port overs, but there is some really nice features. Some like again commentary track. That's always my favorite. Introduction with Ford and the director. It's kind of wild whenever like you see Harrison Ford involved in stuff because I think he's kind of at the point where like he just doesn't really care and he's just like collecting those checks. But so it's always fun when he's like a part of the feature the special features. So yeah, Fugitive, this is a fun movie. I think this is definitely one if you're like an action fan. This is pretty top tier 90s action. So Fugitive 4K, mwah, really
I've been
good.
waiting for that one to come out on 4K for a while. I know my wife's been like I really want to get this. I'm like, nope, just hold on. I'm pretty sure it's coming out this year. I think we're good. So I'm glad it finally made it. And because now she knows I'm not a liar, and like I was trying to make us not have to double dip. So I was very excited at that, and I'm glad it looks good. I'm very
Yeah.
excited to check it out.
And the release saved your relationship. So
yes, she would have divorced me if the Fugitive did not come out on 4K. Thank God. My final title, I wanted to end on a pretty solid note. This is the other TV series I mentioned that I was covering. This is from RLJE Entertainment with AMC. This is the second season of Dark Winds. And I think this is a really good show. I don't think I've talked about it on here before. I've talked about it on TikTok. So that's a plug for our TikTok channel. We do different stuff on there as well. This is a really good series that's primarily set like on a native reservation. It's like a Navajo reservation for this one. And as you see, it's executive produced by George R. R. Martin and Robert Redford. So you have a pretty good pedigree behind this. It's based on a book series. And the first season was a really solid first entry into this. You kind of got to know the characters and like this like police chief and like this young sergeant who there's more to him than meets the eye, and you kind of learn more as the season goes. And there's some more of that fallout in this season, and you're kind of picking up from the threads of the first season, which had like a very climactic finale that kind of left things a little bit in flux. So people are kind of dealing with that. And then so for our main character here, who people might recognize from Doctor Strange, he played a really interesting, sinister character in not Doctor Strange, Doctor Sleep. God help me, Doctor Sleep, the Mike Flanagan movie. My mind, where Doctor Sleep. But it deals a lot with his character this season, and a lot of like the main antagonist that's kind of rolled into town. It kind of ties back to stuff in his past, so you get to learn a lot more about the characters, and there's a deepening of some of the dynamics of like that were kind of introduced in the first season, involving one of our main characters. His wife's works in healthcare, and she's been researching the act of forced sterilization for Native women, and how that kind of like bubbles up even more into the second season. And there's a lot of really cool character dynamics. And this season, the pacing is like off the charts. It just like keeps on moving. There's some really good character moments still, but it's really like a breakneck pace throughout, and it's very exciting. I think this is kind of one of the more overlooked shows on TV right now. As I mentioned earlier, there are so many shows that are out every year. It's kind of hard to keep track of all of them. But one plug I will give for this one is they're short seasons, so you can get caught up pretty quickly. The first season was 6 episodes. This is 6 episodes. You're 12 episodes behind. You can knock that out. And there's been a third season ordered, so you can be caught up. And for genre fans who are like, I'm not sure about this, there's some like vaguely supernatural elements included in this as well. I won't go too much into that, but there's some interesting things that you might not expect from like a cop drama. It's not strictly a cop drama. It delves into some of that like native experience, and it really, I think it honors the culture pretty well. I know that the creative team, they heard some of the criticisms from the first season about some of the representations and like speaking of like certain languages and stuff, and they were very open to that, and I know they tried to make some changes in the second season to try to make things a little bit more authentic and relatable to a native audience. So I like that they are kind of responsive to some of that criticism and not just trying to like dismiss people. But overall, really entertaining show, really good show on AMC. I recommend the Blu-ray because it looks very nice. There are no special features in this season, unfortunately, but it maintains the really like A+ audiovisual presentation. But if you are not sure and you want to get caught up, you can stream it on the AMC Plus. But either way, I would recommend checking this out because it's a really good series.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like a blind buy for me, especially I like that it doesn't feel that like you said, you can get caught up pretty easily.
Mhm.
And yeah, no, I kind of love when you said that there's a little bit of a sort of supernatural kind of twist. It almost kind of reminded me of a little bit of like True Detective, where like
Yes, it's very much like kind of like a cousin to True Detective, like in tone,
okay,
and
nice.
it's really good. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and there's always like, I mean, like I feel like this is kind of the perfect time for like binging shows. I mean, it's getting colder, you don't want to go out, you just kind of want to like find it
Mhm.
like something like that, like a cool new discovery. And with that, that is our episode. And as always, any likes, comments, all that stuff, that's so awesome to hear y'all's feedback on like what we cover and what you think of the releases. And please subscribe. We put out really fun content daily. I have some really cool interviews coming up. Tia just brought back her top 10 videos series, which is so cool. And everybody's doing really awesome stuff on the channel. And so you don't want to miss that. As always, thank you for hanging out with us.